Hi, I'm Anne Hogan. I'm Dean of the College of Performing Arts in the Musco Center for the Arts here at Chapman University in Southern California. And welcome to today's episode of Musco Connects. Now, here at the Musco Center, we are super excited to be presenting the Martha Graham Dance Company on February 11th. That will be part of the Maribel Musco Contemporary Dance Series. And in anticipation of that performance, I am here today with the artistic director of the Martha Graham Dance Company, Janet Eilber. Janet, hello, welcome.
Hi, Anne. We are so excited to be with you. I know we're going to talk about it later, but the fact that you've organized, so many elements of the campus to be part of our performance, the live music and the students, and so there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there is. And I have to say that it's going to be a really, really special performance for our community and for our students. And just to note that the Chapman Orchestra, our students, are going to be playing the music for this performance. And our students in the Department of Dance are going to be performing in Steps in the Street. So that is just an amazing, amazing opportunity for that. And we're really grateful for you facilitating that opportunity with the company. It's going to be good. We can't
It's
wait.
going to be great. And, all of that helps highlight so many different aspects of our legacy. Martha Graham's relationship with American music, and certainly having Steps in the Street on our program. It's one of her works about social activism.
Yeah.
And, to have students take on that aspect of it is wonderful because the company can't dance the entire legacy in one afternoon.
No, I know it's such a rich legacy, but
Yes.
yeah, our students have been doing great in their Graham classes. I've been watching some of that, so they're all preparing for that. So, Janet, I thought we'd kick off the conversation by hearing about your training and your career as a performer. And just to give a little context for our viewers, I wanted to note that you trained at Juilliard, and while you were still a student there, you were invited to join the Martha Graham Dance Company. And of course, this was at a time where Martha Graham herself was still performing and leading the company. And you danced for nearly a decade in some of the most legendary roles in the repertoire. You've also had you're a very accomplished actor and an incredible career in that realm. You co-starred in the film Romantic Comedy with Dudley Moore and in Whose Life Is It Anyway with Richard Dreyfuss. You were featured in several TV series. And on stage, you were nominated for a Drama Desk Award for your role in Stepping Out, that was directed by Tommy Tune. And then in 2005, you took on your role as artistic director of the Martha Graham Dance Company. And your vision for the company has been so notable, and for the innovative approaches that you facilitated for audiences to connect with both the legacy of Martha Graham's repertoire, but also dance in the 21st century. So, wow, Jana, you're an inspiration.
You're making me tired just listening to all that.
That was just the highlights. That was just the highlights. But in terms of your training as a dancer, so we know that you studied at Juilliard, but what about before Juilliard? How did you start dancing, and what drew you to dance?
I was born in Detroit, and as a 5, 6 year old kid, saw the Treasure House ballerina on Captain Kangaroo and told my mother I wanted to do that. So I did once a week ballet lessons. But the thing that really, really sealed my fate was that my parents took jobs at the Interlochen Arts Academy in northern
Oh,
Michigan. The National Music Camp had been there for many years, and when they started a winter program, my parents took jobs in the math and English department, and I had to have an arts activity. And I had studied ballet in Detroit, and so I became a dance major. And throughout my high school years, had about 4 hours a day of training in ballet,
mhm.
modern composition, improvisation, and of course, performance. So that kind of in-depth training from 13 to 18 was really, of course, invaluable. And then I wound up
Yeah.
at Juilliard. But, at Juilliard, it was my first encounter with the Martha Graham technique.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Martha has a very formal, codified, extensive physical vocabulary that's been compared to classical ballet in its scope. But I had never, I'd been studying more the Jose Limon style, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And my first year at Juilliard, I was required to take the Graham technique, and I
Mm.
really did not connect with it. I didn't like it at
Oh, you
all.
didn't?
I didn't like it at
Interesting.
all. And I skipped many of my Martha Graham classes in my freshman year at Juilliard. But in my sophomore year, I was cast in the student production of Diversion of Angels, one of the things on the program that we're bringing to
Mm-hmm.
the Musco, and the light bulb went off. I suddenly
Mm.
realized I was learning this vocabulary that was poetic and expressive and would allow me to bring my whole self to the stage spiritually and emotionally and of course physically. The Graham technique is quite physical.
Hmm.
And then it began to all make sense and became really a through line through my life at this point.
So it's really interesting that it was the beyond the technique, which is a challenging technique, a beautiful technique, but challenging, that it was actually, performing in the work itself, that it sounds like it really allowed you to really fully experience that repertoire.
Absolutely. Those exercises suddenly began to make sense.
Mm,
The Graham technique is Martha developed a style of moving that is driven by the torso. And your viewers, audience members have probably heard about her famous contraction and release. And those are movements of the torso that use the power of the core muscles. The core muscles people talk about in yoga, Pilates, everything. Um, so those classes start sitting on the floor so that you learn to
mm-hmm.
articulate your torso. And I couldn't figure out why we were sitting on the floor. But once we started dancing, the choreography, I realized, my gosh, the power that the body is trained for in those technique classes, in developing those core muscles, then serve you as such a tool of expression.
Mm.
I became a convert.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting of understanding that all that work and all of the technical aspects, and then it can just melt away and you can kind of,
Exactly.
feel yourself in the work. But how did you manage to be a student at Juilliard and a member of the company at the same time?
They were very closely aligned. Martha Graham was one of the founders of the dance department at Juilliard, and many of her company members taught there. So during my junior year at Juilliard, Martha was quite ill and not expected
Mm.
to live. And some of my teachers at Juilliard, who are fine members of her company, began an apprentice program in order
Oh.
to reconstruct and capture film as many Martha Graham dances as they could put together in three
Hmm.
months. Because she wasn't expected to live, and they began to think about succession and how we're going to capture this legacy. So I was one of the students that was brought in just to learn the material as quickly as possible. And at the end of that apprentice program, Martha was back in the studio and a small tour was planned. And a few of us that had been part of that apprentice program were incorporated into that tour. And Juilliard, being so closely aligned with the Martha Graham Center,
Right.
allowed this and gave us credit for performing with the Martha Graham Dance Company as well. They should.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's all the stars aligned, I guess, in terms of the connection with Juilliard to Graham. But tell me about when you were in the company. What was it like taking on some of the roles that Martha Graham had, created on herself? And did she help you prepare for those roles?
She absolutely did.
Hmm.
She was very active in the studio in the 1970s and early 80s, and she was directing her ballets and she was creating new ballets.
Mm.
And Martha, part of her genius, part of what allowed her to create this language that is so revealing of the inner life I mean, that's what she said. She wanted to reveal the inner landscape. Part of her genius was that she was able to read people. She could just
Mm,
look at the way you walked across the room and understand your psyche, you know. And as a director, it meant she knew whether she needed to be a mother, whether she needed to be a dictator, whether she needed to be a flirt, whether she, you know, and she
mm.
was a chameleon in terms of being who she needed to be to get what she wanted out of you. Uh,
And she did it. She was spot on about that
Spot
approach
on.
to it.
She was
Yeah.
spot on. She really she was a genius, and
Mm,
she truly could just look at you and have a conversation with you and have a deep understanding of who you were, what your vulnerabilities were,
mm.
what you needed to bring yourself to be a better artist. You know, one of my favorite stories about Martha is in one of my early rehearsals. um, I had a way of standing that I thought was beautiful, which was kind of, you know, with the tip of my head or something as I was waiting for the next combination. And she called me aside and she said, she literally said, "Darling, you've got to get your head on straight." Yeah.
I love it.
She knew that this was a default position and that it was meaningless. It was a placeholder. She wanted the angle of my head to start at the base of my spine and the power to come up through my guts, if you will, and out my focus and be intentional. You know, what am I looking at? What am I desiring? What am I saying? And the angle of your head is very revealing. So, I mean, for her to that to be one of the first corrections and directions she gave me, it's a life lesson, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds like she did it in a very kind and straightforward way. And it also makes me think about, the connection between Graham's approach to movement and truth.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. That's
Absolutely.
beautiful.
She, she
Yeah.
she wanted she wanted the essence, the truth of being a human being. And in rehearsal, she could tell if you were hiding, if you were putting up
Mm.
a facade and not really revealing all that you knew about yourself or about being a human being. She knew if there were parts of you that you were not willing to share, and she wouldn't put up with it. She
So
expected you to give it all.
yeah, that's so when expecting to give it all, but it sounds like it's really interesting to me that she must have created an environment where the dancers felt safe to do that because it can be scary to reveal everything, right? I mean, you're kind of,
Right,
bare in your soul.
right. I don't know if it felt like a safe environment for
Oh,
everyone. You know, she was pretty formidable, but it was an expectation.
ah,
You know, if you weren't interested in living up to that expectation or you didn't feel you could, you didn't stay in the Martha Graham Company. That was,
right,
you know,
right, right.
it's a group of people who are attracted to that kind of the depth of that kind of artistry.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, we weren't
Yeah.
troubled.
Yeah, which no, but it's interesting. And I mean, having seen the company perform recently, I can see that in the dancers that you have beautiful dancers in the company today. And there is that just commitment and presence and really that total giving themselves to the work that is was really beautiful in seeing them in performance. But I'm interested. So your career in acting as well.
Yeah.
Tell me about, does your work as an actor, has it informed your work as a dancer and vice versa? And how do you think that your work as a performer has informed your work now as artistic director?
Well, for starters, the vice versa part of it. Once I had worked for Martha Graham straight up in college and understood that I had to be able to bring myself 100% to her physical vocabulary,
Hmm.
switching over to a verbal vocabulary, I mean, the same, you have to use the same technique.
Hmm.
Or to Broadway dancing, for example. It's a different physical way of moving, but it is the same process of informing the movement with a personalized interpretation. So the audience feels like you're connecting with them, not just by making the right shapes, but by connecting with them, having a kinesthetic conversation with them. So it's the same technique. Once I learned it from Martha, I found switching over to Bob Fosse, doing a Brigadoon for Agnes de Mille,
Hmm.
or those things. It was I already had been well trained in how to make a personal interpretation in for other ways of expressing myself.
Yeah, that's fascinating how versatile that work is, and that the well, the physicality of that technique, but also, the range of that repertoire that it seems like you could just kind of seamlessly adapt to other ways of dancing and to acting as well.
Mhm.
Um, but then, so how did it come about that you took on your role as artistic director? I mean, were there lots of discussions? How did it come about?
Well, after Martha's death, the organization really wasn't prepared to say, who are we going to be without Martha Graham?
Hmm.
And it was sort of a, crazy time. We had a court case. Martha's heir claimed that he owned the works and he owned her name, and there was a lot of turmoil. So that the company really couldn't ask who are we going to be without Martha Graham. First, we had to say, wait a minute, she made those ballets for this company, and we should own them. And so
Hmm.
long story short, through that court case, the Graham organization was found to own her name and the ballets. Some of them were in the public domain, but that allowed us to move forward. And at first, I was hired to organize the archives and the licensing business, everything that the court had awarded
Oh,
to us. So I started there and then was asked by the board to come in as artistic director of the three parts of the organization: the company, the school, and the archives.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what was it like going from, being in the archives and then being the person in charge of all aspects of it?
No, I think having left the Graham Company and done Broadway and then done movies and television, I sort of had stepped outside that world and had a better understanding of our audience and
Hmm.
of our place in the world of the arts, and began to look at who we were going to be without Martha Graham. Oh, when
Hmm.
the organization had Martha, this genius at a mountaintop where audiences and funders would come to her.
Hmm.
Without her, we were just another mountaintop. And we had to figure out how to bring audiences to us. So my North Star as an artistic director has been audience access, new forms of audience access, experimenting with partnerships with media and narration, certainly with social media, with curated programs and season themes, and uh, creative projects such as we did something called the Lamentation Variations, taking Martha's iconic solo, which will be on your program,
Yeah.
and asking today's choreographers to create short variations in reaction to Martha's original solo. So finding ways for artists to be connected to our legacy, but at the same time to be free to create in their own contemporary voices. And
Yeah, that's right. And
commission.
in an earlier discussion that we had with you and Michael Novak of Paul Taylor Dance Company and Dwight Roden of Complexions Contemporary Ballet, we were talking about, kind of the challenges of, bridging legacy and future vision. And I think that, your work as artistic director has been truly notable about these fresh approaches like the lamentation solos. What would you say? Because you've done so much, Janet, and the company has just found these incredible ways to be fresh and relevant and exciting, but also drawing on that, that heritage. What would you say are some of the most successful initiatives that you facilitated?
Oh, wow. Well, the Lamentation Variations and similar projects where we take a specific Graham work and allow today's choreographers to expand, create, is certainly the commissioning of new work and
Hmm.
having that honor program with our Graham Classics, where there's a real conversation set up, has been, I think, probably our most successful.
Yeah.
But we've done some really interesting partnerships with a theater company to re-envision a work of Martha's that no longer exists. City Company created a new work with us. I don't know, Anne, there's so many ways. I mean, bringing students, licensing our works to
Yeah.
students and allowing them to perform on stage with the Martha Graham Company has been huge for us to embrace the next generation in that way. Uh,
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, for the students, it's one thing to, have a master class and to see a company perform, but actually to get to that level of embodying the work and then performing, it's just it's extraordinary. And I think that I can see in our students as they're preparing for that work that you mentioned earlier about how your work and how it really like it impacted your entire life and your approach to things, and I can see that happening in the studios now. So that's incredible. You've also done some amazing work with technology, and I'd love to hear a bit about that because you're finding ways for the audiences to connect with the new works and in performance, but also using technology in really cool ways.
Yeah, we have been experimenting with technology for quite some time. We had a residency at Google 7 or 8 years ago where we worked with technology that would allow us to fill a camera, really the memory of a camera, with all of our archival images of lamentation. And
Mm.
when a dancer performed lamentation in front of that camera, it would project images of Martha Graham, of me,
Oh,
of past generations doing some of the same movements. It was quite haunting and beautiful
wow.
to feel this. More recently, in last spring, one of our leading dancers, Xin Ying, has created a work with using AI, and she took a film of Martha Graham dancing Letter to the World and manipulated
Mm.
it using AI so that Ying could be on stage sort of dancing with Martha Graham. And the
Wow.
theme of that work was how this generation, the new generation, carries on a legacy of a person they've never met.
Mm.
So Ying's relationship to the image of Martha and the choreography came together as a real work of art. We're not looking to use technology as a trick. It's really to find ways to use it to still make profound works of art.
Wow, that's amazing. I was in a meeting recently about well, how are we actually, using AI in the arts and in different ways? And you are Martha Graham Company is certainly a leader and innovator in that. And I think that kind of exemplifies the way that you're always really embracing that future vision of new approaches to things. It's also interesting to see that, in your role and with that dancer that you had the experience of working with Martha Graham, but of course the new generation would not have, and how something like AI can kind of spark that connection or
Yes.
those experiences. That is really wild.
Yeah, she's really a special. She's an amazing dancer, and you'll see her on your stage. But she's also a great creative personality and artist who's making new things all the time, along with being a star of the Martha Graham Dance Company.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, let's talk about February 11th then.
Yes.
And yeah, maybe we can start again with Steps in the Street. I know that was choreographed by Martha Graham in 1936, and I believe that it is at least in part informed by her response to the Spanish Civil War.
Spanish Civil War, but we believe even more so to the fact that she declined the Nazis' invitation to dance at the Olympic Games in Berlin that year. And she made a work titled Chronicle, which is in reaction to that rise of fascism, the
Hmm.
Spanish Civil War, the Nazis in Germany. And Steps in the Street is one section of that dance of Chronicle. It evokes the sort of devastation of war, the devastation of spirit. It's a work for all women. Her company was only women in the 30s. And that clearly brings, an empathy. The audience, I think, empathizes in this very abstract and yet moving work. And the fact that it's abstract, I mean, it's kind of hard to describe. There's no narrative. We don't see women weeping on stage or, sending men off to war, and no narrative. It's a real work of modernism. The geometry, it's 10 or 12 women in black dresses, and the lines of force, the diagonals, the shifting patterns, the swirling bourrée patterns, those little tiny footsteps. And I encourage your audience to look at this as a modernist piece of art that comes to life through movement, rather than looking for specific characters or people that are telling a story.
Yeah, I think so. And it's been interesting to hear from the students about, their experience in this work and really through the essence of the movement itself and how powerful it is and how that can be a catalyst for really deep understanding of feelings and that unfortunately resonate with a lot of issues today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you feel have audiences recently, responded to this?
Oh, we've performed. I've been artistic director this is my 21st year. So
Mm.
we have performed Steps in the Street and Chronicle in several situations that inform it in different ways. For example, we were down in the South after Hurricane Katrina devastated
Ah,
New Orleans, and we performed it. It was the first time the company had danced in Germany in quite some time, uh, 10 or 12 years ago, and that
wow.
different resonance to it. But the fact that it is so streamlined, it is so stark and
Hmm.
modernist, means that it's not trapped in any decade.
Hmm.
It's timeless, if you will, and it speaks to the challenges of any generation or any year or week, really.
Yeah, it's a really, really powerful piece, and we're so honored to have that. And again, the experience for our dancers is just life-changing for
Yeah.
them. We also have on the program Cortege,
Mhm.
and this is a new work by Bay and Asa.
Mhm.
Really excited about that. But I think that it is connected to or inspired by Graham's 1967 Cortege of Eagles. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Sam and Amati, that's Baye and Asa,
I'm sorry.
are such, how do I say this? They're such multifaceted artists, and they approach their works with very intellectually. They do a lot of research, a lot of studying. So when I invited them to do a work, I said, would you like to visit the archives and see if there's anything inspiring there? And they said, we'll be there
Of
tomorrow.
course. Yeah.
So they spent many hours in our archives, and they kept coming back to this film of Cortege of Eagles.
Mm.
And this is Martha's, it's a panorama of the Trojan War with all the characters are in there. And it's a commentary on war and that nobody wins, you know.
Mm.
So they have taken some movement from Cortege of Eagles. They have sampled the music that was written for Martha for a electronic score that they've used to create this choreography, and a similar theme. No one wins when it comes to war,
Yeah.
but they've used their own sensibilities, their own incredible movement vocabulary. You will not believe how fast our dancers are moving, and
Really.
oh, it is really exciting, stunning, emotional movement. So I'm so pleased because it has a deep connection to Martha's concerns about humanity.
Hmm.
And these two artists are similarly concerned, and they have created a completely new work of art based on the same inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, and what an exciting piece for the company, but also what a journey for those choreographers to have had that opportunity to connect with this piece and then find their own voice and their own way of, of reimagining it for today. We're really looking forward to that. And so we've got Diversion of Angels, and you spoke about your experience with that. I think that's from 1948. Is that correct?
Angels is 48, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, so tell us about that piece. What would help our audience in, preparing for the performance to know about Diversion of Angels?
Well, the version of Angels now we're about 12 years after Steps in the Street. So if
Mhm.
you appreciate the stark modernist geometry of Steps in the Street, by the time you get to Diversion of Angels, Martha has experimented and expanded her palette, but she's still a modernist. So she's decided to do a work that is simply all about love. And
Mhm.
in it, she decided she wanted to create a world without gravity. There's no straight up and down in Diversion of
Huh.
Angels. It's all off center, off balance, kind of drunk on love, topsy turvy with love. But like Steps in the Street, the geometry of this work tells the story. It creates this constantly shifting, amazing world like being in love. There's also some abstract modernism involved. She said she was inspired by Kandinsky, a painting of Kandinsky
Mm.
that she saw that had a streak of red in it, and she put that streak of red into Diversion of Angels. There are three main couples in Angels. There is the couple in yellow, which represents kind of adolescent, mercurial love, flirtatious love. Then the couple in red, which is the more passionate, lyrical love. And the couple in white, which is the more mature, enduring, spiritual love. As your audience watches this work, they can keep in mind Martha used to tell us this might be three different women, or it might be one woman at three different times in her life.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it's in those works. The audience really has their role to play and needs to, be active participants in it. When you talk about Martha Graham and modernism, I guess is it primarily that abstraction and the lack of a clear or an explicit narrative? I guess, and then how do you see Martha Graham's work as progressing or not from the way that modernism was impacting her vision?
Right. Let me start with the modernism because, again, on your program, we're dancing a solo that was kind of the shot heard round the world when it comes to modernism.
Yeah.
That is her iconic solo from 1930, Lamentation. And you have to imagine what audiences at that time thought of this dance where the
Mhm.
soloist is seated on a bench for almost the whole time. You can't see her arms and legs. She's encased in a tube of fabric that she stretches and wrenches in. Martha used to say, you can look at this solo as if you're looking at a woman grieving, or as if you're looking at grief itself. She
Mm.
was trying to get down to the essence of emotion, and in Lamentation, she did it. She captured it, and it looks like a piece of a Brancusi sculpture come to
It
life.
does. It
Yeah,
does. Yeah, and that incredible the jersey fabric and it's not um I don't know exactly how. It's not that long of a piece, but it is so intense and
yeah,
just so iconic.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's about 4 minutes long.
Uh-huh.
And it really is the moment that Martha really got her arms around stripping away decorations, stripping away
Yeah.
facade. American dance in the early part of the 20th century was vaudevillian. It was ornate costumes, floating
Mhm.
fabric, gods and goddesses or swans and flowers. And Martha, between the wars, really wanted to create a style of dance that would express the human condition.
Yeah.
And she experimented and experimented, and with lamentation, you can just see how there's no decoration, there's no facade. You are seeing the thing itself.
Yeah, I'm with the dancer on the bench. I mean, there's the space that's covered is not very big, and yet the intensity of what an audience can connect with and really find in themselves somehow their own experiences with grief. But I mean, it is still so powerful and to think again that, I don't know, something about when you're talking about that connection with the human condition
Mhm.
that endures.
Absolutely. The human
Yeah.
condition doesn't change as long as there are humans on this earth. We've performed lamentation everywhere from South Korea to Cedar Rapids to, all over the world. And audiences everywhere understand it. They
Yeah.
feel it. They know it in their bodies and in their psyches.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if an audience didn't know the title of that work, they would understand it. The movement and the intensity of the movement is just so clear. It's really extraordinary.
And it's something to experience physically. You know,
Mm,
as you watch Lamentation, you don't need to think about it intellectually. You should just let the feeling of that body moving be recognized by your own body. Because Martha used natural gesture. You'll see a lifted palm as if that character is asking for something, or
mm,
you see a closed position like this. I mean, these are movements we've all made, so
right, right.
unconsciously perhaps. But Martha took that body language, that natural instinctive gesture, and she turned it into a dance language.
Well, it's interesting because I think that that makes the work accessible to anyone. I mean, I'm even thinking about we will have some people in our audience on February 11th who have seen Martha Graham many times, who have studied it, and others who maybe it's their first experience with it. And I just find it very intriguing that they're all going to be touched by all of these works, but that in that quality that transcends kind of um, you know thinking and consciousness into some type of intuitive embodied connection to it is really just so unique about Graham's approach.
Mhm.
But we've got another work too on mass, and this is to the music of Leonard Bernstein. And if I understand it correctly, it's actually featuring a previously unpublished fragment of music. So tell us about this
Yes,
piece.
we were so excited when we decided that we wanted to use Bernstein music for our 100th season, which is what we're in. We decided that because he and Martha Graham had a collaboration in the 1980s that, for one
Oh,
reason or another, never came to fruition. But as we were talking with the Bernstein organization about, possibly this work or possibly that work, we were talking about taking some excerpts from Bernstein's Mass. Um,
mm,
the people at the organization came to us and said, we were looking in the Martha and Lenny file, and we found a short piece of music we think he wrote for her. And
wow.
they said, if you're interested, we would allow you to use it and expand it into, a piece of music that could be choreographed. Because it was very short. It was only 49 seconds long.
Oh,
But
wow.
it
Wow.
definitely had a beginning, middle, and an end. It was called Vivace. It was definitely Bernstein has a very energized rhythm to it and
Yeah.
chord, structure and everything. So we turned to the conductor and composer Christopher Roundtree, who is in LA. He's the artistic director of Wild Up, the musical ensemble.
Mm.
And we've worked with him on many occasions, and he was delighted to think about building on something that Leonard Bernstein had done. So,
How wonderful. So that collaboration that never quite happened is
yeah.
happening. And I'm trying to wrap my head around the image of a Lenny and Martha file.
She wrote letters to him.
Really?
He preferred the telephone. So some of the letters say, I think what you said on the phone the other day is absolutely right, and I'm going to think about this thing, and maybe we won't do that. There was a real back and forth, and
Wow.
yeah, and
Well,
unfortunately,
how
it just
how
didn't come.
amazing that that's coming, coming together in a different way so many years later.
Exactly.
I just can't believe the repertoire that we're going to be having in that evening. I mean, it's so broad ranging, and and the participation of our students is just it's going to be a really really special evening here at the Musco Center, and it really is.
I
But
mean, that program is kind of curated. Now, talking with you, I realized how deep the connections. Each dance on the program is connected to Martha, not just the one she created, but Cortege from Bayan Asa, which
yeah.
takes some of her movements and takes inspiration from, and then En Masse by Hope Boykin is built on a collaboration that she had in the 1980s. So we just continue to discover how fertile her legacy is and how many different ways we can curate it and create new, and we hope profound art from it.
Well, we are honored to be part of the 100th anniversary celebrations of the Martha Graham Dance Company and this extraordinary program that's been curated for us. And Jana, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us here on Musco Connects. And I am looking forward to seeing you here in California in February.
My pleasure. We can't wait to be there. We can't wait to work with the students and the orchestra and to be in front of your audiences. Thank you for making that all happen.
Well, thank you. And Janet, really wonderful conversation. And I will see you in February.
See you in February.